I never thought I would live long enough to question the love of my own children. At 75, I believed I had given them everything: my strength, my sweat, my sacrifices. Every wrinkle on my face carried the story of sleepless nights I had spent working so that they never went hungry. Every scar on my hands reminded me of the days I lifted burdens too heavy for my age, just so they could have a lighter future. People always say, when you grow old, your children will become your walking stick. I carried that belief in my heart for years. My wife had passed away a decade ago, and ever since then, I placed my trust entirely in my children. My son, Daniel, was the eldest, strong-willed, confident, but sometimes too ambitious for his own good. My daughter, Claire, was softer in nature, often reminding me of her late mother, though she had a streak of stubbornness. And then there was Anna, my daughter-in-law, who married Daniel 15 years ago. She was kind at first, or at least that was the mask she wore. Our home was not a mansion, but it was large enough for all of us to live together. I used to think of it as a place filled with warmth, laughter, and the echo of memories. My grandchildren often ran through the halls, filling the air with their carefree joy. It was everything a man my age could hope for: family close, legacy alive, and love surrounding me. Or at least, that's what I believed. But as the days stretched into months, I began to notice little cracks forming in the picture of perfection I had painted. The glances between Daniel and Anna when they thought I wasn't looking. The way conversations would abruptly stop when I walked into the room. Claire's nervous smiles that seemed to hide words she dared not speak. At first, I brushed it off. Old age, I told myself, makes a man paranoid. Maybe I was hearing things wrong, or perhaps they were discussing matters they didn't want to burden me with. That's what I convinced myself to believe, because the truth was too heavy to accept. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and bathed the living room in its dying orange glow, I sat with Daniel. He was scrolling on his phone, barely looking at me. I tried to start a conversation, reminiscing about the old days, asking about his work. His replies were short, clipped, as though I were an obligation he had to deal with, not a father he cherished. "Dad, you should rest," he finally said without looking up. "Don't worry about things. Just leave it to us." It sounded caring on the surface, but something about his tone unsettled. It wasn't respect, it was dismissal. That night I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. For the first time, a thought crept into my mind that I couldn't shake. Do they see me as a father or as a burden? I tried to sleep, but the unease gnawed at me. And that was the first night I stayed awake longer than I should have, listening. Not intentionally, at least not at first, but when I heard the faint murmur of voices drifting from the hallway, curiosity pulled me from my bed. I moved carefully, leaning on my cane, making sure the floorboards didn't creak beneath my weight. Their voices grew clearer as I approached the living room door, which was only half shut. "He won't last much longer anyway," a woman's voice whispered. It was Anna. "Don't say that," Claire responded quickly, her voice trembling. "Strong?" Daniel scoffed. "Dad can barely walk up the stairs without losing his breath. Look, it's time we think ahead. We can't keep waiting forever." My heart stopped. I wanted to believe they were talking about something else. Maybe about selling the house or preparing for some distant future. But the way they spoke, the coldness in their tone, it felt like knives carving into my chest. I stepped back silently, retreating to my room, my pulse racing faster than it had in years. I sat down on the edge of my bed, shaking, trying to calm the storm raging in my chest. Did I hear them right? Or was my mind playing tricks? That night, I realized something I never imagined I would. Sometimes, the people closest to you wear masks so perfect it takes years, decades even, to see the truth beneath them. And as much as I wanted to pretend it was nothing, deep down I knew that conversation was just the beginning of something darker. If you've ever trusted someone only to feel their love fading, you'll understand my pain. Tell me, would you confront them or stay silent, waiting for the truth to reveal itself? The morning after that chilling night, I tried to convince myself I had misheard. Maybe it was fatigue. Maybe my ears, weakened with age, had twisted their words. I wanted so badly to believe it was nothing. After all, these were my children. The very people I raised, fed, and loved with every breath in my body. How could they possibly speak of me like that? But the seed of doubt had been planted, and once it takes root, it spreads like poison ivy. In the days that followed, I started noticing more subtle things. Daniel would avoid eye contact with me when I asked him about finances. Anna would whisper on the phone in the kitchen, her voice sharp, then hang up quickly when I entered. Claire, sweet Claire, seemed torn, her smile quivering like a leaf caught between two storms. One evening, I sat in the hallway chair, pretending to doze off. My cane rested across my knees, and my eyes were barely closed. That's when I heard Daniel and Anna talking in the dining room. Life insurance pays out more if... Anna paused, lowering her voice. "Keep it down," Daniel snapped. "Do you want him to hear?" My chest tightened. Life insurance? They couldn't mean mine, could they? I shifted slightly, the chair creaking under me. Their voices fell silent for a moment, then picked up again, softer this time. "Look, we can't keep waiting forever. His health isn't what it used to be. One fall, one accident, things can change overnight." My hands trembled against the cane. Accident? Why did that word feel so heavy, so dangerous? Pressed my lips together, holding my breath, afraid even the sound of air leaving my lungs would give me away. That night, lying in my bed, I stared at the ceiling again, the shadows on the walls twisting into shapes that mocked me. What if I was wrong? What if I wasn't? Both possibilities terrified me. The next day, Claire brought me tea in my favorite mug, the one with little blue flowers my late wife had loved. She smiled softly as she placed it on my bedside table, but her eyes? Her eyes told a different story. They were red, as if she had been crying. "Claire," I said gently, "is something troubling you?" Her lips parted, but before she could speak, Anna's voice called from the hallway. "Claire, can you help me with this?" Claire flinched, then forced a smile. "It's nothing, Dad, just rest, okay?" She slipped out quickly, leaving me alone with my unanswered questions. I stared at the steaming cup of tea, the aroma rising into the room. For the first time in my life, I hesitated to drink something offered by my own daughter. That's when the fear truly set in. I wasn't just imagining things anymore. My instincts, sharpened by years of survival, sacrifice, and fatherhood, screamed at me that something was terribly wrong. From then on, I made it my mission to listen, to observe, to uncover the truth that was being hidden from me inside the very walls I had built for my family. And what I would soon discover would shake me to my very core. What would you do if whispers in your own home made you question whether you were safe? Would you confront your family or keep pretending not to notice? For weeks, I told myself I was imagining things, that perhaps my mind, tired from age, was twisting whispers into threats. But deep inside, I knew the truth. Fear had already made its home in my chest, and every night, it grew heavier. Then came the night that erased all doubt. It was late, past midnight. The house was quiet, except for the creak of the old pipes and the hum of the refrigerator. I had risen from bed to fetch some water, moving slowly with my cane. But as I neared the staircase, voices drifted upward from the living room. I froze. Daniel's voice, steady but hushed, carried through the silence. "We can't keep dragging this out. The lawyer said once he's gone, everything transfers smoothly. No disputes, no delays." My heart thudded so loudly I was sure they would hear it. I inched closer, stopping just at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows. Anna's voice followed, sharp and impatient. "Exactly. We need to be prepared. The funeral arrangements, the paperwork, everything should be ready. That way, when it happens, there won't be chaos." I gripped the wooden railing, my knuckles white. Funeral arrangements? They were planning my death as if I were already buried in the ground. Claire spoke then, her voice trembling. "Don't talk like that. He's still here. He's still alive." There was silence. Then Daniel sighed heavily. "Claire, you're being naive. Dad's 75. He's frail. Look at him. He barely eats. He struggles to climb the stairs. We can't ignore reality. It's just a matter of time. A matter of time. The words stabbed me deeper than any blade could. I was no longer their father in their eyes. I was a ticking clock, a fading shadow, a body waiting to fall. I wanted to scream, to storm down those stairs and demand answers. But something inside me, some quiet, desperate instinct, told me to stay silent, to listen. Anna leaned forward, her voice low but filled with venom. The house alone is worth millions. Add his savings, the insurance, the land. Daniel, we could start fresh. No more debts, no more struggling. But as long as he's here, everything is stuck. You know that. Claire whimpered. You're talking about our father, Anna. He's not just some obstacle. But Daniel cut her off. He stopped being a father the moment he refused to trust me with the business. If he had just signed everything over, we wouldn't be in this mess. Tears burned in my eyes. I leaned back against the wall, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. My son. My firstborn, the boy I once carried on my shoulders, the man I thought would honor me, was now discussing my funeral as if it were a business deal. My knees shook, and for a moment I thought I would collapse right there. But I forced myself to stay quiet, to retreat into my room as carefully as I could. When I shut the door behind me, I sank onto the bed, my hands trembling. I buried my face in them, muffling the sobs that broke free. At that moment, I realized something no parent ever wants to admit. Sometimes, the people you give your life to are the very ones who will plan your death. And that was the night I made a silent vow. If they wanted me gone, if they were already rehearsing my funeral, then I would no longer play the helpless old man they believed me to be. I would watch. I would listen, and when the time was right, I would strike back, not with anger, but with truth, because betrayal is like a fire. It consumes everything in its path. But I had lived through worse flames before, and I was not about to let my own blood burn me alive. Imagine overhearing your own children planning your funeral. Would you confront them immediately, or stay silent and prepare your own plan? The morning after that dreadful night, I looked at my children with new eyes. Their faces, once familiar and comforting, now seemed like masks, thin covers hiding greed and betrayal. Daniel smiled as he passed me at the breakfast table, but behind that smile, I saw calculation. Anna placed eggs on my plate, but her hand trembled, as if she feared I could see through her. Claire, my sweet daughter, avoided my gaze altogether. I ate slowly, quietly. Every bite felt heavy. I wanted to scream at them, to demand how they could sit across from me after plotting my death, but instead, I kept my silence. Sometimes silence is more powerful than words. After breakfast, I retreated to my room and shut the door. I sat in my old armchair, staring out the window at the oak tree that had stood in our yard longer than I had been alive. Its branches were strong, unyielding, even after decades of storms. I told myself I would need to be like that tree, steady, patient, unbroken. If they thought I was weak, let them. If they thought I was blind, I would let them weave their web of lies and greed while I quietly spun one of my own. The first thing I did was call an old friend, Mr. Harris, a lawyer I had known for nearly 40 years. I had once helped him when his business was struggling, and though we hadn't spoken in years, I knew I could trust him. "George?" he said when he picked up, his voice surprised but warm. "It's been a long time, my friend." "Yes," I replied softly, my eyes darting to the door to ensure no one was listening. "And I need your help, urgently but discreetly." We arranged to meet the next day in his office, away from prying eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed, staring up the shadows again, replaying their words over and over. Funeral, insurance, house, land, my life reduced to property and numbers. Before dawn, I rose quietly and began searching through my belongings. Old notebooks, dusty envelopes, stacks of photographs, and then I found it. The small box I had hidden years ago. Inside were papers, account details, and the original deed to the land I had inherited from my father. Documents that no one else in the house even knew existed. I tucked the box beneath my arm and whispered to myself, "They think I'm finished, but they have no idea." The following afternoon, I made my way to Mr. Harris's office. The city had changed since I last walked its streets. New shops, taller buildings, but the law firm's brass sign was still the same. He welcomed me inside, offering tea. But I wasted no time. I laid out everything. My suspicions, the conversations I had overheard, the way my own son and daughter-in-law spoke of me like I was already in the ground. Mr. Harris leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "George, I've handled many cases of greed in families, but yours," he shook his head, "it's one of the worst I have ever heard. You need to protect yourself, and quickly." Together, we began drafting a new will. This time, the terms were clear. Daniel and Anna would inherit nothing. Claire, though weak in her defense of me, would receive only a modest share. The rest, I decided, would go to my grandchildren directly, bypassing their parents entirely. And a significant portion, I declared, would be donated to charity. I wasn't just protecting my legacy, I was making sure my betrayal wouldn't fuel their greed any longer. Before leaving, Mr. Harris placed a hand on mine. "You're stronger than they think, George. Don't let them see your fear. And remember, I'll be ready when you need me." When I returned home, Daniel asked where I had been. "I just visited an old friend," I said with a calm smile. He studied me for a moment, suspicious, but said nothing. That night, I began the second part of my plan. With the help of a small camera I had purchased years ago out of curiosity, I installed it discreetly in the living room, angled perfectly to capture their nightly conversations. It felt strange spying on my own family, but then I remembered the whispers of life insurance, the discussions of funeral arrangements, and I realized they had already chosen their side. Now it was my turn to choose my own. And as I lay in bed that night, a new feeling surged in me, not fear, but determination. If they thought I was too weak to fight, then soon they would discover just how wrong they were. If you discovered your own family plotting against you, would you forgive them, or would you prepare for battle in silence as I did? The morning air carried a strange calm, the kind that comes before a storm. I sat in my study, the documents spread neatly across my desk. From the outside, it looked as though I were preparing to surrender everything: my money, my independence, my life. But in reality, every line of ink, every signature, every notarized stamp was part of a plan carefully crafted to catch my own son in his web of greed. When Michael arrived later that day, Jessica wasn't with him. He walked in alone, his face pale but determined, as if he were preparing for battle. "Dad," he said, his voice steady, but his hands trembling. "Are you ready? We need to finalize the papers if you want the Sunset Manor unit. They can't hold it much longer." I studied him for a long moment. My son, my boy who once clutched my hand as we crossed the street, who once beamed when I taught him how to ride his first bike. Now he sat before me like a stranger, eager for me to sign away my life. "Yes, I'm ready," I said calmly. Relief washed over his face. He pulled a sleek leather briefcase onto the table and began laying out the documents: power of attorney forms, financial disclosures, medical releases, an arsenal of legal weapons disguised as paperwork. As he explained each form, I nodded politely, hiding the storm that churned inside me. "This one, Dad, gives me temporary authority to handle your finances, just in case you're unwell. Nothing permanent." I skimmed the document, already knowing what it contained. It was far from temporary. It would give him immediate and total control of my accounts, my retirement savings, investments, property, everything. "You've thought of everything," I said evenly. He smiled weakly. "It's for your safety. We just want what's best for you. Best for me." Those words cut deep. As he slid the papers toward me, I picked up the pen and pretended to hesitate. He leaned forward eagerly, his eyes fixed on the signature line. "You're making the right choice, Dad. This way you'll never have to worry about bills, about emergencies. Jessica and I will handle everything." I looked into his eyes. For a split second, I thought I saw the boy I once knew, buried beneath the desperation, but the glimmer faded, replaced by the cold gleam of hunger. I signed the papers. At least that's what he thought. In truth, these weren't the documents he believed them to be. My attorney, David, had prepared decoys. To Michael, they looked legitimate, stamped and notarized. In reality, they granted him authority over nothing more than a nearly empty account I had set up days earlier, containing exactly $1. Michael exhaled with relief as he gathered the pages. "You won't regret this, Dad. You've done the smart thing." I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. "Michael, I said softly. Tell me something. Do you ever think about the boy you used to be? The boy who wanted to build things, not destroy them? His expression tightened. Dad, this isn't about the past. This is about survival. Jessica and we're drowning. You don't understand what it's like. I understand more than you think. He looked at me sharply, suspicion flickering across his face. What do you mean? I stood slowly, walking toward the window. Outside, the garden glowed in the fading afternoon sun. I know about your debts, Michael. I know about the mortgages, the credit cards, the failing business. I know about the psychiatrist you've been paying to declare me incompetent. His breath caught. He stared at me as though I'd slapped him. How do you know all that? I turned back to him, my voice firm, because I had someone look into it. You see, you're not the only one who can make plans. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed again, struggling for words. You think you've outsmarted me, but you've underestimated me, Michael. I've spent 70 years learning how to survive, how to fight, how to protect what is mine. Did you really believe I'd hand it all over so easily? He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Dad, please, I didn't mean... The doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Michael jumped. Who's that? He asked nervously. Someone who wants to join us, I said calmly. Moments later, David walked in, carrying a slim folder. His presence filled the room with authority. Michael, he said, nodding politely, I'm your father's attorney. We've been preparing for this meeting. Michael's eyes darted between us. What's going on? David laid the folder on the table and opened it. Inside were copies of every false document Michael had just signed, along with the real ones that secured my fortune safely in trusts he couldn't touch. Your father has protected himself, David said evenly. Every cent is beyond your reach. And these papers you just watched him sign, they grant you authority over nothing. Michael staggered back a step, his face ashen. No, this can't be. It can, and it is. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. My son stood there, trembling, his future collapsing before his eyes. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so he could misintake the words. You thought you could take my life, my money, my freedom, but all you've managed to take is your own dignity. Michael's chest heaved. He looked like a cornered animal torn between anger and despair. Dad, please, you don't understand. I had no choice. You always had a choice. And you chose greed. The weight of my words pressed down on him, and for the first time, I saw the truth sink in. The trap was set, and tomorrow, it would snap shut. The night after our confrontation, I barely slept. The echoes of Michael's trembling voice, his pleas, his excuses, haunted me. But my resolve was unshaken. Tomorrow, the world would see the truth. Tomorrow, my son would face the consequences of his betrayal. At dawn, I brewed myself a strong cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the light creep over the horizon. The garden, once a place where Michael had chased butterflies as a boy, now stood as silent witness to the war between us. I whispered to myself, this ends today. By mid-morning, David arrived. His presence was steadying, like an anchor in rough seas. Together, we prepared the final steps. The police had been notified, not just about Michael's attempt to take control of my assets, but also about the psychiatric scheme, the forged signatures, the pressure tactics. Everything was documented, every thread tied neatly into a noose of his own making. At noon, the door opened. Michael walked in, Jessica at his side. Her expression was cold, confident, as though she were still convinced victory was within reach. Michael's hands shook slightly, but his jaw was set in determination. Dad, Jessica began, her tone sharp, we've given you time. It's time to stop resisting and accept what's best for you. I said nothing. Instead, I slid a thick envelope across the table toward them. What's this? Michael asked, his voice tight. Proof, I said simply. Jessica snatched the envelope and pulled out the documents inside. Her eyes scanned the pages, her confidence draining with each line she read. Bank statements showing empty accounts, legal filings moving my assets into a trust outside their reach, evidence of their visits to the psychiatrist, audio recordings. Yes, I had managed to capture their conversations near my room that night. Her hands began to shake. This isn't possible. It's very possible, I said. My voice was calm, measured. While you were plotting to strip me of everything, I was preparing. Did you think an old man couldn't outthink the two of you? Michael's face paled. He staggered back into his chair, his breathing shallow. Dad, please, we didn't mean... The knock on the door cut him off. 2 officers entered, badges gleaming under the light. Jessica gasped, dropping the papers in her hands. Mr. Harper, one officer asked, addressing me. Yes, I said, firmly. That's them. They tried to steal everything I've built. They tried to declare me incompetent, to take away my freedom. Michael's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide with betrayal. You called the police? I met his gaze without flinching. You gave me no choice. The officers stepped forward. Jessica immediately began protesting, her words spilling in a torrent. This is a mistake. He's confused. He's old. He doesn't understand. But the officers weren't listening to her. They already had the evidence in their hands. Michael, however, sank deeper into his chair. His fight gone. The fire that once drove his schemes had burned out, leaving only ash. As the officers placed handcuffs on him, he finally looked at me, really looked at me. Dad, his voice cracked. I didn't want it to end like this. A lump formed in my throat, but I forced myself to stay strong. Neither did I, son, but you left me no other way. Jessica shouted all the way to the patrol car. Michael, on the other hand, walked silently, his head bowed, his spirit broken. When the door closed behind them and the house fell silent again, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had won the battle, but at what cost? My son was gone, not by death, but by choice. He had chosen greed over love, betrayal over family. David placed a hand on my shoulder. You did what you had to do, he said gently. I nodded, though my chest felt heavy. I protected myself, yes, but I couldn't protect him from himself. That night, I sat in the garden, under the stars. I thought about the boy Michael had once been, the boy who laughed easily, who dreamed big. I wondered when that boy had disappeared, when greed had poisoned his heart. Perhaps I would never know. But one thing is certain. I had survived, and survival, at my age, is not just about clinging to life. It's about holding on to dignity, to truth, to the right to live free from fear, even if it means standing against your own flesh and blood. As the wind rustled the leaves, I closed my eyes and whispered, I forgive you, Michael, but I will never forget. And with that, my story ended, not with defeat, but with hard-earned victory. A reminder to anyone who listens. The strength of an old man should never be underestimated.